The Cumberland River is Nashville's water supply. It feeds the treatment plants that serve over 1 million people across Middle Tennessee. Right now, that river is running at roughly a quarter of its normal flow. Some smaller rivers across the state are down to 16%. And the drought driving those numbers is not slowing down. It is spreading across 8 states, into the Carolinas, through Georgia and Florida, and it just hit a scale that has not been seen in the Southeast since 2007. What nobody was paying attention to 6 months ago was the rainfall, or more exactly, the lack of it. Starting around July of 2025, rain across the Southeast began falling short. Not sharply at first, just enough to notice if you were watching the gauges. A few inches below normal here, a dry week stretching into 2 there. Nothing that made the evening news in Nashville or Atlanta or Charlotte. Month after month, that quiet shortfall never fixed itself. It just kept adding up. By the time December rolled around, the entire region received less than half of its normal rainfall in a single month. Then, the winter that followed, December through February, turned out to be the driest in 45 years across the lower 48 states. And it was not just dry. It was the second warmest winter on record. Almost no rain paired with above-average heat pulled moisture out of the soil faster than anyone expected. Trees and grass that normally stay asleep through winter started drawing water early because the warmth told them spring had arrived weeks ahead of schedule. So the ground dried out from both sides at the same time, not enough coming in from above and too much going out through the roots. By March of 2026, the Southeast was locked in a drought that covered more ground than anything since 2007. And the rivers were already telling the story before anyone openly said so. United States Geological Survey stream gauges show the Cumberland River system carrying roughly 10,900 cubic feet per second across 5 monitoring points. Normal, for late March, is over 44,000. Put those two numbers side by side and the system is moving at about 24% of where it should be. At the Nashville gauge on the Cumberland, recent readings have bounced between 7,000 and 10,800 cubic feet per second, roughly 47 to 52% below average depending on the day. Smaller waterways feeding into the Cumberland are in even worse shape. South Chickamauga Creek near Chickamauga, Georgia, is flowing at just 16% of normal. That is not a typo. 16%. Over at Sevierville, Tennessee, the Little Pigeon River sits at 19%. The Ocoee River at Copperhill is at 29%, and the French Broad River near Newport manages roughly 42%, which sounds almost healthy until you realize it is still less than half of what it should be carrying this time of year. Across the entire state, Tennessee stream flow averages 51% of normal. Numbers like these do not bounce back with a few afternoon storms. Getting back from gaps this deep takes weeks of steady, soaking rainfall across the entire river system, and that has not happened since last summer. Here is where the gap between the data and the official response starts to get interesting. Nashville has logged only 1.5 inches of rain for March 2026 as of March 26th, against a normal of 3.65 inches by that date. On its current pace, this March will finish among the top 6 driest in the city's recorded history. WSMV weather reporter Bree Smith has been tracking the decline in real time, and the picture is getting worse. Both severe and extreme drought levels are worsening across parts of the state, and temperatures have averaged nearly 10 degrees above normal all month, with record-tying highs of 89 degrees on back-to-back weekend days. March in Nashville felt more like late May. Lawns across Davidson County have started turning brown weeks ahead of schedule. Creeks that normally feed into the Cumberland through neighborhoods in Brentwood and Franklin are running at a trickle or sitting totally dry. People living along the Stones River, one of the Cumberland's major feeder rivers east of the city, have been posting photos of bare gravel beds and rock shapes that have not been visible in years. Over 3.1 million Tennessee residents now live in drought-hit areas, a number that grew by nearly 6% in just 1 week. Despite all of that, Metro Water Services has not put out a single drought alert, not a water limit, not even a notice asking people to ease up on their sprinklers. Every day, the utility pulls roughly 109 million gallons from the Cumberland River through Cheatham Reservoir using 2 treatment plants. And as of right now, 0 Tennessee water systems are reporting drought impacts. Nashville's formal drought plan lays out clear triggers for when limits are supposed to begin. Saving measures kick in when customer demand goes past 80% of rated treatment limits, or when the Army Corps of Engineers sends word that Cumberland flows may become too low for pulling water. Neither trigger has been tripped yet. So, a city of over 1 million people keeps pumping 109 million gallons a day from a river system running at 24% of normal, and nobody has been asked to cut back on a single gallon. Either the situation is not as bad as the gauge data suggests, or the buffer systems are doing their job so well that nobody feels the squeeze yet. It is closer to that second one, and the buffer has a name. A network of 10 dams spread across the Cumberland River basin, managed by the Army Corps of Engineers Nashville District. None of these are small structures. Wolf Creek Dam in south-central Kentucky holds back Lake Cumberland, the largest lake in the system. Further east, Dale Hollow Dam and Center Hill Dam hold back huge amounts of water in the upper Cumberland highlands. Downstream, Cordell Hull, Old Hickory, and Cheatham serve as shipping locks and lower basin controls that shape what flows past downtown Nashville and reaches the Ohio River. David Bogema, the Water Management Section Chief, and water engineer Robert Dillingham have spent years running this system as the region's key drought shield. Nashville is very lucky to have this level of control, because the dams can hold back water during floods and release it carefully during droughts to keep downstream flows steady for water supply, shipping, and river wildlife. But those dams need water behind them to work. They are buffers, not sources. They spread around what nature gives them. And right now, nature is not giving much. Percy Priest Lake, one of the key core lakes just east of Nashville, stood at 483.95 feet on March 13th. Summer pool target is 490 feet, a gap of just over 6 feet. For context, during a similar dry stretch in 2016, Percy Priest was only 3 feet below target, and resource manager Todd Yan was already raising public worries about those levels. Right now, the gap is double what concerned officials back then. Across the Tennessee River system, the Tennessee Valley Authority manages a matching network of 49 dams, spanning 652 miles. Lake readings there tell the same story. Cherokee Lake sits 17.5 feet below full pool. Douglas Lake is nearly 19 feet below. Norris Lake has dropped 11.6 feet. Boone Lake, 9.6. Part of that comes from normal winter drawdown, where TVA lowers lake levels on purpose to make room for spring floodwater. In a normal year, rainfall between March and June fills those lakes back up easily. When that rain does not show up, the math changes fast. James Everett and Tom Barnett at the TVA River Forecasting Center are the ones watching this math every day. If spring rains fail, the choices get painful. Cut power output, send less water downstream, and watch the effects spread across farms, cities, factories, and river life all through the valley. During the 2007 drought, TVA cut power output at several dams and carefully limited releases to keep minimum flows going. Back then, the system held. Whether it holds again depends fully on what falls from the sky over the next 3 months, and the lakes are starting from a lower point than they did 19 years ago. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover drought and water crises across the United States as they develop, with the full picture you need to actually follow what is going on. While all of this is playing out inside Tennessee, the drought map outside the state borders paints an even darker picture. Over 86% of the entire Southeast has crossed into moderate drought or worse on the United States Drought Monitor. For some sense of scale, that is the largest drought footprint the region has recorded since 2007. Nearly 100%, 99.58% to be exact, is listed as at least unusually dry. In the Drought Monitor's entire 26-year history, only one other week has produced a larger reading. And this footprint is still growing. Both North Carolina and South Carolina now sit at 100% drought coverage at the moderate level or worse. Last time every square mile of both Carolinas was in drought at the same time was December 18, 2007, 19 years ago. Across North Carolina, roughly 66% has reached severe drought and 4% extreme. South Carolina sits at 65% severe and 12% extreme or worse. Georgia may be sending the loudest warning signs of any state in the region right now. Around 95% of the state is in drought. Late March brought exceptional drought, the worst level on the Drought Monitor's 5-step scale, to southern Georgia for the first time during this event. Eccles, Lowndes, Brooks, Thomas, and Grady counties all crossed into that zone. In response, Georgia's Environmental Protection Division raised drought limits to level 2 in affected areas, cutting outdoor watering down to 2 days per week on an odd-even schedule, and only before 10 in the morning or after 4 in the afternoon. The thinking was simple. The outlook pointed toward more heat and more dryness, and officials like Jim Ussery at the EPD wanted to save as much water as they could in Lake Lanier before things got worse. Anyone who followed the 2007 drought knows why Lake Lanier matters so much. Sitting on the Chattahoochee River north of Atlanta, this lake serves as the main drinking water source for one of the fastest-growing metro areas in America. Right now, Lanier sits 6 to 7 feet below full pool. Downstream, the Chattahoochee flows at roughly 47% of normal, carrying about 17,700 cubic feet per second against a seasonal average north of 37,000. Over the past 12 months, Gainesville, Georgia, has built up a 21-inch rainfall shortfall. What makes this worse is that water levels may actually keep dropping through the spring instead of rising as they normally do. Already, the Corps of Engineers has cut releases from Buford Dam, lowering outflows from 750 to 650 cubic feet per second to save storage. 19 years ago, Lake Lanier dropped 19 feet below normal. 19 feet. Atlanta, a metro area of over 5 million people, came within 90 days of running out of drinking water. Governor Sonny Perdue held a public prayer for rain on the steps of the state capitol. Across the region, towns and cities put tight water limits in place. Car washes shut down. Restaurants stopped serving water unless customers asked for it. Fountains went dry in downtown Atlanta parks. Farm losses topped $1.3 billion in field crops alone across the Southeast, with Georgia taking over $1 billion of that hit. At the same time, the Georgia Bay Complex fire burned 441,705 acres, the largest wildfire in the state's history. In Tennessee, the 2007 drought pushed Percy Priest Lake to some of its lowest recorded levels and forced the Corps of Engineers into careful, daily handling of every cubic foot of water moving through the Cumberland Basin. Right now, this drought has not reached that peak strength. Exceptional drought stays limited to pockets of southern Georgia and northern Florida, while in 2007 it covered most of the region. But conditions are getting worse quickly across all 3 major parts of Tennessee, and the key difference is speed. Tennessee state climatologist Andrew Joyner has been tracking the pickup closely. Back in 2007, the drought built over more than 2 years before reaching its worst point. This one has grown to this level in roughly 9 months. If it keeps going at this pace through spring and summer, the comparison to 2007 stops being a reference point and starts being a floor. Florida adds yet another layer. About 9% of the state reached exceptional drought by March 26th, up from just 1.6% a week earlier. Across North Florida, some areas received 25% or less of normal March rainfall, with total shortfalls topping 1 foot since late 2025. In February, a 25,000-acre wildfire burned through Big Cypress National Preserve in the southern part of the state. Looking ahead, wildfire risk across the entire Southeast is expected to stay above normal through at least May. Over 86% of the region already in drought, combined with unusually warm temperatures, means fire conditions across the South are the worst they have been in years. On the Savannah River system splitting Georgia and South Carolina, the Army Corps of Engineers declared Drought Trigger Level 1 back on December 5, 2025. Hartwell Lake had fallen to 654.26 feet, nearly 6 feet below full pool. Thurman Lake dropped to 324.28 feet, also nearly 6 feet below target. Senior water manager Stan Simpson had seen it coming for months. Since September, it had just been a matter of time before the system hit drought triggers. Releases at Thurman Dam were capped at 4,200 cubic feet per second as a daily average to protect what stored water remains. Farm damage across the Southeast is real and still growing, because the key planting season has not even started yet. Already, the USDA named 19 Alabama counties as primary natural disaster areas in January 2026, pointing to severe drought harm to row crops and animal feed. Across Alabama, the drought wiped out crop yields and feed supply in several counties, and many cattle ranchers could not cut enough hay to feed their animals through the winter months. Alabama Commissioner of Agriculture Rick Pate watched it play out across the state's farming towns in real time. When hay runs short in winter, ranchers face a brutal choice. They can buy extra feed at pumped-up prices, sometimes double or triple the normal cost. They can haul water to fields where ponds have dried up, or they can sell animals they cannot afford to feed, often at a loss, flooding the market and driving prices down for everyone. Across Tennessee, 16 counties received disaster status through 2 separate rounds in the fall of 2025. In Williamson County, Extension Agent Matt Horsman has been watching the soil moisture numbers with growing concern. Going into summer without full moisture in the ground means drought hits much faster once the real heat sets in, because you start draining a reserve that is already half empty. Down in Clarkson, Kentucky, hay grower Kevin Priddy has been farming long enough to know when a season crosses the line. 2025 was the worst growing season he has ever lived through, and good quality hay became very hard to find across the region. February 2026 was Tennessee's 22nd driest on record, going back to 1895. And the January-February pair ranked 13th driest. For farmers counting on spring soil moisture to carry them into the growing season, those shortfalls are not just numbers on a chart. They are the difference between a healthy crop and a failed one. Across the country, corn area drought spread from 30% to 51% by early March. Soybean area drought jumped from 30 to 53%. Winter wheat drought grew from 35 to 56%. Once planting season kicks off in full across the southeast, which is only weeks away, those numbers will turn straight into harvest losses and higher feed costs that spread through the entire farm supply chain. Rivers used for shipping are feeling the drought from a totally different angle. Barge traffic on the Mississippi, Ohio, and Cumberland Rivers has been held up for the 4th straight year, making this the longest run of low-water shipping problems in modern history. Back in September 2025, the Ohio River added only 8% of lower Mississippi flow when it normally gives around half. Down at St. Louis, the Mississippi dropped to just 1.27 feet, roughly 90% below average level. To put that in context, the Mississippi River system normally moves about 500 million tons of cargo per year, worth over $130 billion. When water levels drop, everything slows down. Barge companies like American Commercial Barge Line had to shrink tow sizes by up to 34%, meaning each trip carries fewer goods, causing delays of 24 to 48 hours per load. Shipping rates told the story. Cairo to Memphis rates averaged $18.84 per ton, compared to $14 in non-drought years. Spot rates at St. Louis spiked to $23.34 per ton, 85% above the 3-year average. Those costs get passed along to farmers shipping grain, power plants shipping coal, and builders shipping gravel and stone. Meanwhile, on the Cumberland, Barkley Lock closed for nearly 2 weeks in early March for gate repairs, and traffic stays well below normal. With the river at 24% of normal flow, more shipping limits seem sure to follow. Thousands of miles from these drying riverbeds, the force driving all of it sits in the Pacific Ocean. La Niña, the on and off cooling of Pacific surface waters near the equator, reshapes weather across North America by pushing the jet stream northward. When that happens, storm systems that would normally sweep across the southern states get steered toward the Ohio Valley or the Great Lakes instead. Rain that should fall on Tennessee and Georgia falls on Indiana and Michigan. 2 separate La Niña events happened in 2025, and NOAA's new Relative Oceanic Niño Index, adopted in February 2026, resorted both winters as clear La Niñas by adjusting for long-term ocean warming. That change explained why the southeast dried out as badly as it did, even though earlier measures had called the signal barely there. Looking forward, there is a narrow opening for things to get better, but it comes loaded with catches. NOAA's Spring Outlook, released March 20th, sees La Niña shifting to neutral conditions this spring, with above-normal rainfall possible for parts of the southeast during April through June. That shift from La Niña to ENSO-neutral conditions could open up more normal storm paths across the southern states, and National Weather Service Director Ken Graham is watching that shift closely. Roughly 80% of forecast models point to El Niño forming by early fall 2026, which would normally bring wetter weather to the south. Not everyone is reading the data the same way. Fred Gossage, a weather forecaster at Tennessee Valley Weather, has been tracking rainfall shortfalls of 1 to 2 feet over the past year across much of the valley. Going into summer with that kind of gap will make drought conditions much worse, and the spring rains would need to be well above normal just to close the hole. Separate forecasts from Climate Impact Company actually project dryness getting worse in the southeast by June 2026, which goes straight against the more hopeful federal outlook. If those outside predictions turn out right, the southeast enters its peak water demand season with lakes already 6 feet or more below target, rivers at a fraction of normal flow, and farm fields that never got the spring moisture they needed. Summer in the southeast means air conditioning running around the clock, which means power plants pulling more cooling water from rivers that do not have it to spare. It means lawns and gardens drawing from city water systems that are already pumping at full speed. It means every gallon matters in a way that it did not seem to matter in January, when the drought was still something happening on a map instead of in people's faucets. So the government forecasts say one thing. Outside analysts say something else. And between those two answers sits a river system carrying 24% of its normal flow, still feeding treatment plants that pump 109 million gallons a day for a city that has not been asked to save a single drop. Alabama still does not have a statewide water management plan. Percy Priest Lake sits 6 feet below where it needs to be by summer. Fire season is already running hot across Florida and Georgia. Barge operators on the Cumberland and Mississippi are bracing for another year of limits. Over 86% of the Southeast sits in drought. And every Thursday, when the Drought Monitor puts out its weekly update, the map adds more red. As of today, the Southeast's lake and dam systems are holding. The structures that engineers built across the Cumberland Basin and the Tennessee Valley are doing exactly what they were designed to do: buying time. State climate scientists and federal forecasters all agree on one thing: those structures buy time. They do not make rain.